All right, welcome everybody. This is the effects of foreign language learning on the mastery of core subjects in elementary school children. This is my capstone using immersion education to see what kinds of benefits it gave to students outside of learning the language. So some key learnings I took away from this whole program, we got the importance of research and education, the vast amount of research that is out there just in the last couple of years has proved to be quite important to not only my capstone but everything that we've been doing these past 2 years. And I guess I wasn't quite as aware of the importance of all that educational research and how up to date it stays. Um, then obviously applying that research to practice in the classroom, not just doing what my Spanish teacher did for me when I was in third grade or fourth grade or sixth grade or whatever. And then just throughout this whole program, just a deep respect for everything that all of our educational leaders need to do and what they go through every day. It's really easy to judge them from our classrooms, but getting real deep and dirty into the whole educational leader cesspit, I almost want to call it. Their jobs are tough. So the research question that I looked at was what impact does the use of foreign language education, specifically immersion education, have on elementary school children in demonstrating mastery in literacy and math? So just some of the findings. The majority of the research was really beneficial and it was really positive in argument for immersion education. So the research suggested that it aids in all core subjects. One study I saw had really high science scores, but that was only one study, so I can't be 100% on that. But overall, math and literacy scores and mastery indicators were pretty high compared to their non-immersion peers, usually based on state assessments. Something interesting to note is these students, in grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, their math and literacy scores in English, obviously, were quite low because they were tested in English and they hadn't had any training really in English and in English reading. But once they were able to, bridge that gap, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, their scores really did rocket up to match and then oftentimes beat their non-immersion peers. Especially with the very young students, we're talking preschool and as early as 2 years old, children with exposure to foreign language have much higher cognitive function. They have oftentimes better what's called symbolic flexibility, which is the ability to use many words for one concept. For example, someone with low symbolic flexibility might only be able to say house for a place of living. Somebody with high flexible or symbolic flexibility might be able to say house or dwelling or domicile or abode, or you can go on and on and on. So and that's an indicator of vocabulary and word usage, which is tied to you know intelligence. Also, students were able to just even though they didn't understand what was going on often in their immersion setting, they were able to look at non-verbal cues. So their non-verbal cue kind of understanding, being more observant of their surroundings is kind of a phenomenon that was witnessed. And then also something that was really interesting was the huge benefits to English language learner students or ELL students. So students, usually it's, you say, oh, immerse them, just put them into the English setting. Well, actually, students, let's say Spanish-speaking students who are put into dual immersion, which is usually half of the day in, say, Spanish and half of the day in English. ELL students who were in those programs often tested out of needing ELL services faster than their non-immersion peers, since they were also able to then demonstrate their learning in their own language. So instead of just being tested in English, a language they don't understand, they were able to demonstrate their their higher abilities in math and Spanish reading in you know in their native language, which is a better indicator of how they're faring in school overall. And then finally, one thing that I noticed amongst the studies was skill transfer, which just means one skill, let's say spelling, transfers usually pretty well between languages. You learn how to spell in Spanish, you don't have to relearn how to spell in English. So it's kind of buy one get one in this kind of situation. So the skills transfer, especially in math and spelling, and just something as simple as sounding out words, was it was a pretty quick skills transfer. So you don't have to waste time teaching this is how you spell something in Spanish. You obviously some of the rules are different, the pronunciations are different, but that overall skill set is something that does transfer quite nicely between most languages. So advancing the research findings in my teaching, leadership, and community practice, I've really been thinking pretty hard on how to advocate for the creation of an immersion program in my own district. It's just something that probably needs to happen sooner rather than later. And we're thinking about relining the district and repurposing some of the elementary schools. So I'm thinking, trying to figure out how to go to school board and say, hey, look, I have this information for you. And then also the use of immersion techniques in my own middle school classroom. I mean, I have 6th grade students. They are barely out of elementary school, and I'm sure that they will benefit from immersion techniques just in the 40 minutes I have them a day. So outcomes of my capstone research, how will I advocate as a professional practice in the future? And my topics of interest, I'm really interested in seeing what happens to older students once they've been in immersion, once you maybe continue on with immersion or see what they're like in middle school after immersion, and when they still have that access to that foreign language. I really just kind of want to see what happens to them. And I would love to try and get this immersion program going in my own district and seeing what could happen, because we're always looking for that leg up, trying to attract families into our district. What kinds of programs can we offer? And immersion just seems like one of those, in my biased opinion, that could be a pretty big bang for your buck. And again, the continuation of immersion education in secondary programs. Learning about myself, I am a lot more reflective on how to adapt what I've learned into my own education and what I'm teaching. Even though it's a program for ed leadership, there's always something important you can use towards your students, and since we're learning so much, and it just seems like it's something important that I need to put into my own classroom, like keeping my literature current. So I'll have to go back next year and reread and see what the new immersion studies say, and I'll go back in about 3 years and do it again, and just continue to do that and show that to my students as, your job is never done learning. And then also, I feel like my understanding of policy, finance, and the laws and ethics, something that every teacher needs to know, has really become a lot more informed. And just recently, I've been able to use a school policy in my benefit with a parent who was upset about grading policies. And I was able to just reference a policy real quick. Didn't take me any time to look it up or even consider it. So it's been really helpful. With personal applications, just with this knowledge of immersion education. If I ever had kids, this is exactly what I would do. I would put my children in immersion. I would speak to my children only in Spanish, and hopefully the benefits that I saw in my research would happen to my children. I think I'll always advocate for immersion, whether it's in my district or with my family or anything else. And then just with these new leadership skills, there are many ways I could take that, not just at school. There are organizations I can use. I can, you know, go to the national or the local park system and what ways can I lead there, and anything that catches my interest, I can become a leader there now. And then professional applications, campaigning again for an immersion program. I will always have my research ability, my baseline with my capstone. I feel like I'm better able to stay aware of the district climate, understanding what's going on in those school board meetings, actually attending the school board meetings now, instead of just maybe reading about them later. And then just always searching for those up-to-date resources, whether in the campaign for emergent programs or what's most up to date in teaching Spanish, teaching foreign language. Um, well, that's about it. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful summer.